There was a Joe Manchin in FDR's time, and that Joe Manchin was actually FDR's own vice president, John Nance Garner. During FDR's first term and second term, the vice president was John Nance Garner. During FDR's third term, vice president was Henry Agard Wallace. During FDR's fourth term, which was only 3 months long because FDR died, the vice president was Harry S. Truman. Now, Harry S. Truman was a very pro-labor, pro-worker Democrat. Henry Wallace, also a very pro-labor, pro-worker Democrat. Henry Wallace was very similar to Bernie Sanders, but John Nance Garner, vice president during FDR's first term and second term, John Nance Garner was basically very similar to Joe Manchin. And John Nance Garner absolutely hated the working class, hated workers, was totally against any pro-labor provision of the New Deal. Now, John Nance Garner used to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And of course, he's one of the two speakers of the House of Representatives who became vice president. The other one being Schuyler Colfax, who was very pro-civil rights, but also Schuyler Colfax was corrupt because he took bribes. And back then, of course, bribery in politics was considered bad. It still is, but of course it's not considered bad anymore. It's basically legalized. But the point is, John Nance Garner used to be Speaker of the House of Representatives, and he became Speaker when the Democrats gained control of the House of Representatives, while Republicans Herbert Hoover was president and Charles Curtis was vice president. So John Garner became the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And the election of 1932, the progressive governor of New York, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, ran for president in the Democratic primary, and so did John Nance Garner as well. Now, FDR was clearly going to win, and so FDR won the nomination, but the DNC nominated John Nance Garner to be FDR's vice president. And immediately there was an ideological and political collision, because FDR, being a Bernie Sanders style, a very pro-worker, pro-labor, New Deal Democrat, whereas John Nance Garner, being Joe Manchin style and very anti-worker, hating on workers, being one of the most conservative Democrats ever, there was conflict. And so John Nance Garner basically did everything possible to sabotage as much of FDR's New Deal as possible, but FDR still powered through and managed to get most of it through. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when John Nance Garner, actually there were two straws, but there were two straws that broke the camel's back. Of course, FDR couldn't move his legs because he was polio, but anyway, the point is, John Nance Garner basically lost it with FDR or I guess FDR lost it with John Nance Garner, because FDR was very angry with the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court was horrible, which sounds familiar, doesn't it? The Supreme Court was so horrible that they were just destroying any pro-labor provision of the New Deal, and the Supreme Court was basically anti-worker, anti-working class American, and they were just trying to declare so many parts of the New Deal unconstitutional. So FDR got angry, and FDR tried to reform the Supreme Court. FDR wanted to do the Judicial Procedures Reform Bill of 1937, which is a fancy way of saying he wanted to add more justices to the Supreme Court to balance out the power and strip the power of tyranny away from the existing corporate judges. And FDR so in the Judicial Reform Bill, there was a provision where it said that FDR could appoint 6 justices for any justice over 70 or something, I believe it was. And so FDR wanted to do that because he wanted, of course, to make it so that the Supreme Court could not unilaterally ruin the lives of American people, and so that he could get his actual good policies passed. But John Nance Garner opposed FDR to the high heavens. Vice President John Nance Garner was going around and telling members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress, to not vote for the bill. And of course, FDR had a super majority. And I think it was by that point like 332 seats or 340. Like, it was a very large amount. But anyway, John Nance Garner was like, don't vote for FDR's Judicial Procedure Reform Bill, and John Nance Garner was actively picking off Democrats and getting them to sign against FDR's plan. And so FDR's biggest ally was Senate Majority Leader, but that Senate Majority Leader ended up passing away, ended up dying. So the bill stalled, and there were a lot of issues, and there was a huge coalition of blue dogs, Joe Manchin types, who were just opposing FDR at any end. And so FDR ended up just basically threatening the Supreme Court to pack them and basically just strawmanning his way through with rhetoric and getting the people on his side and on substantive policy. And of course, the Supreme Court eventually budged, and eventually it worked out later where the Supreme Court, there were so many retirements and stuff, so where FDR got to appoint 8 justices to replace 8 so he got to fill 8 seats, but he never got to pack it. But anyway, his policies and his fight and his like the fact that he fought for people really resonated with people, and it showed them that they cared and they rallied around him. And as for the blue dog, Joe Manchin style, John Nance Garner did not meet a very pretty fate. So in the 1938 midterm elections, FDR wanted to primary the blue dogs who helped tank his agenda. FDR wanted to primary all the Democrats who were against the New Deal, all the Democrats who were against reforming the Supreme Court. FDR wanted to send a message and say, if you stand in the way of my policies and the American people, we will primary you and destroy your political chances. John Nance Garner countered by trying to sabotage FDR's plan in that area. So FDR sent many progressive challengers to challenge the corporate Democrats, and John Nance Garner fought against it, and there was a whole scuffle, and unfortunately many of the blue dogs managed to stay around, and Democrats suffered horrible losses in the 1938 midterm elections, but they still retained supermajority, so that was good. But at least, yeah, but anyway, so, but it shows you that corporate Democrats, when they're in charge, they will lose. But moving on, in 1940, in the election of 1940, presidential election, in the primary, sitting Vice President John Nance Garner decided to primary sitting President FDR. And John Nance Garner's excuse was, well, I'm just against presidents going for a 3rd term, and that's what FDR's doing. But the real reason was because John Nance Garner was just horrible, a ghoul on policy, and he just wanted to primary FDR. But John Nance Garner had no chance because FDR had the support of the people, and he had policies that were popular with people, whereas John Nance Garner had nothing. He just had policies that were unpopular with people. So John Nance Garner lost the primary because FDR just took control of the DNC and completely just hammered his way through, and FDR won a nomination for the 3rd term, and John Nance Garner was basically a lame duck vice president for the rest of the 2nd term, and FDR chose Henry Agard Wallace as his new running mate. Henry Wallace had previously been the Secretary of, I believe it was Agriculture, and so FDR and Henry Agard Wallace, they went into 3rd term, and John Nance Garner retired from politics and went away and became irrelevant. So that's a life lesson. That's how you deal with corporate Democrats and blue dogs, by beating them, never by compromising with them. So, I mean, obviously everyone knows what I'm talking about, so, and I'm running out of my voice, I'm running out of breath, so, but the point is, you have to fight in order to win. And even if you don't win immediately, you will win eventually if you fight. And so fight as hard as you can, and as strategically and as efficiently as you can, and defeat all the corporatists, like FDR did.